Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. We've got a fantastic show on the way. But first, I just want to say thanks to NordVPN, our sponsors here at the Everything is Black and White podcast, who without none of this would be possible. And we've teamed up with them to offer our listeners and viewers an exclusive offer. You can click the link in the podcast description box or go to nordvpn.com/tune to sign up and save your pennies on a plan. It is well worth your time to sign up. You are secure, you are safe, and you're supporting the podcast. Why sign up? I hear you ask. Well, there are a host of benefits. For me, it is the value for money because one subscription can be used across 10 devices. That's your work phone, your personal phone, your tablet, what have you. 10 devices, one subscription. I mean, that is the definition of value for money. The other thing I love about it as well is the way that it keeps your details safe and secure when browsing on public Wi-Fi. So if you're on the bus, the train, you're in a cafe and you're connected to their Wi-Fi, there is always the risk that your details could be compromised. That's your bank details, your passwords, and a load of other stuff as well. But with Nord, you are safe and you are secure. And that for me means a heck of a lot. And look, if you're going abroad as well and you're missing your home comforts and you want to keep with it with all your UK streaming services, then you can click the location back to the UK and make sure you never miss your favorite program. What is not to love about it? It's absolutely fantastic. Very simple to get on board. You download the app, you sign up, and away you go. You're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping yourself secure, and you're supporting the podcast at the same time. And another benefit, and I've already mentioned three, and there are a host of other things to mention as well if we had the time. But the final thing I'm going to mention is a 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's literally no risk. If you don't like it, get your money back. But you will like it because it's a superb app to have on your phone. Keeps you safe, keeps you secure. And once again, you're supporting the podcast. So click the link or go to nordvpn.com/tune to take advantage of an exclusive offer for our listeners and viewers of the Everything is Black and White podcast. Roll the titles. Hello and welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition as Barcelona visit Newcastle United on Thursday for the opening game of the Champions League campaign. It's a pleasure to be joined by Samuel Marsden of ESPN to get an insight into the Spanish giant. Samuel, welcome to the show. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Thanks. Yeah, all good. Really looking forward to this one on Thursday.
Yeah, there's a buzz around Tyneside, and obviously Newcastle and Barcelona have got a good history with the link to Sir Bobby Robson and some fantastic games down the years. So fingers crossed from a Newcastle point of view, we may be able to replicate that 3-2 victory back in 1997. I've got loads of questions about modern day Barcelona because I'll be open and honest with you, I don't watch too much of them. So I'm looking forward to getting the expert view from yourself. To start with, what should we expect from Barcelona on Thursday? How will they approach the game?
Barcelona only know how to play one way really under Hansi Flick. Obviously, he's been in charge since last season now, and the theme has been, the high line. I think maybe not so much for you guys, but certainly when we're talking about Barcelona, there's almost sort of like people have become bored of it being the talking point all the time. But it is such a talking point the way they sort of push up to the halfway line, and then that obviously comes with the high press, which obviously sort of needs to be pitch perfect for them to avoid getting caught in behind. And a lot of the times last season it was perfect. Sometimes they're relying on fine margins. Obviously the introduction of VAR to catch those sort of minuscule offsides sort of helped them out a few times. So that's what you can expect. You can expect a team that will come to play on the front foot, that will take risks, that will try and score goals. If you look at some of their Champions League games last season under Hansi Flick, they were ridiculous. Even in the group stage, you had the 5-4 against Benfica. Obviously everyone, I would presume, would be aware of that 7-6 aggregate semi-final against Inter. Even the quarter-final against Borussia Dortmund was 5-3 on aggregate. So some absolutely sort of wild games, and I'm hoping for something similar at St James's Park on Thursday for Barcelona to play that way. Obviously Newcastle will look to find that space in behind with Gordon, with Alangro, I would imagine, and hopefully we'll see a lot of goals and a lot of entertainment, because that's what we've become accustomed to with Barcelona in the Champions League under Hansi Flick.
And so in terms of Newcastle United, what would be the best way for them to set up, do you think? Is it kind of absorb the pressure from Barcelona, then hit them on the counter?
I don't know if you can absorb the pressure. It's difficult. Obviously, I'm not the experienced coach that Eddie Howe is, but what we've seen from teams that do try and absorb too much is that it doesn't really work. You need to be aggressive in terms of the countering. We saw Rayo Vallecano before the international break. They did it really well. It's more about the timing. Obviously, the space is there. It's more about the timing of the runs. We've seen sort of an adaptation to the run sort of coming from the second line, so the sort of the forwards of the opposition teams being able to sort of step up offside, and then whether it's the fullbacks or the wingers sort of making the late runs and the space being in there, which is why I mentioned Gordon and Elanga. Obviously, in theory, it's easy to imagine those runs, but then it's another thing to to be able to play that pass if Barca are pressing, as they did press it lots of times last year, because obviously you're under a lot of pressure. Picking out a perfect pass to playing, whether it's Gordon or Elanga or whatnot, is difficult. But you have to be. I think you do have to be aggressive against Barcelona like they are. I don't think you can sit back. I mean, you can, and teams have done, but they haven't had much success. Obviously, Newcastle are a different level of team to a lot of the teams that would have tried that in La Liga. But yeah, there's no right or wrong way, and there certainly is not a Barcelona team that's unbeatable. It's a team that will give you chances if you play the right way.
But then they're coming to this game having beaten Valencia 6-0, so a nice win for them to prepare for Thursday night.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like I wouldn't say a much needed win, but even though they had 7 points from their first 3 games, there were a few sort of concerns about how they started the season. I think because they weren't in the Club World Cup, there was an expectation that this season they were going to sort of, at least at the start of the season, have an advantage, over Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, because they'd had that summer off, which so rare for the big clubs, whether it's club football in the summer or whether it's international tournaments. It's very, very rare that Barca players would have, sort of full month off to go and reset, which was needed, especially after going so far in all competitions last season. But they were a little bit sort of sloppy in their first 3 games. The Mallorca one was a bit of an anomaly because Mallorca were down to 9 men in the first half, so you can kind of sort of write that one off really because it became almost a training exercise. But they went 2-0 down at Levante, did come back to win 3-2, but again gave away a lot of chances. Like I say, against Rayo Vallecano, they drew 1-1. They could easily have lost that game. And after 3 games, they were the team in La Liga that had conceded the most big chances. I think it was 20 in 3 games. When you consider against Mallorca, they're playing against 9 men for a half. That sort of illustrates sort of how they played in those first 3 games, the chances they'd given up. And sort of led to Flick saying after that Rayo Vallecano game, he didn't mention anyone in particular, but he said egos kill teams. We need to get back to what we were last season in terms of working as a team, as a unit, in terms of that pressing, that intensity. And we did see that a little bit against Valencia. So they kind of needed that, I guess, sort of at least to prove to themselves that they're back on track and they can still do that ahead of such a big game that they've got against Newcastle. Although maybe we'll come on to team news. Maybe that Valencia team that Barca put out against Valencia will be slightly different to the team we see in midweek. We'll see how many changes they make from that game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because the starting 11 didn't include a few big names, but a bit like Newcastle, who won on Saturday against Wolves. It was a much needed win domestically to get them onto a positive footing for this game. But yeah, indeed, talk to me about the potential starting 11 for Barca on Thursday.
Yeah, I guess the top line is it looks like there'll be no Lamine Yamal. He went away with Spain with not an injury, but just sort of managing a sort of an overload, they call it in Spain, in the groin. He played both those games for Spain. He didn't train for Spain. Took painkillers to play, and he's come back and he's missed the Valencia game. Hansi Flick absolutely furious with how Spain managed that situation and how they've sort of taken care of young players in the past. Barca have obviously had history with Pedri and Gavi having injuries due to overplaying, and Gavi's injury was picked up with Spain, etc. So there's a little bit of a clubsy country. I guess the battle is as old as time, that one in it, but brewing with Lamine, with Spain and Barcelona. He's not trained Monday, he's not trained Tuesday, so it's looking very unlikely that he'll be involved on Thursday, although not completely ruled out yet, whether he could sneak on the bench, whether they could risk him from the start. We'll see what happens with Lamine, but if you had to sort of guess at the point that we're talking, we'd probably say Lamine won't be involved, certainly not from the start. Elsewhere, Gavi's out, Alejandro Balde, the left back, is out, but Frenkie de Jong is back. So we'll probably see Frenkie de Jong come back into the team. We'll see Rafinha come back into the team. He was obviously on the bench on Sunday. I guess then there are question marks over who they will play at centre back and who they will play up front and how Rafinha comes in. There's sort of no guarantees whether Lewandowski starts, whether Rashford starts, whether Ferran Torres starts. And the really sort of big developing issue is, I guess 2 in terms of long term, maybe less related to the Newcastle game, but what Hansi Flick's preferred centre back pairing is gonna be this season. They've lost Inigo Martinez, who was a big leader there last season. He's gone to Saudi Arabia, and then who will be the number 10? It was a given previously that it would be Dani Olmo, but at the moment, Fermin Lopez is the form player.
Plenty of decisions there to be made by the Barcelona manager, and some big names as well to either play or leave out. I'm sure if Marcus Rashford does get the nod, he'll get an interesting reception from Newcastle United fans. But yeah, what a blow not to be able to potentially not to be able to see Yamal, because you want to be playing against the very best as a spectator. You want to be watching the very best at your ground, but you got to take every advantage of your Newcastle United. In terms of Newcastle United players, I don't know how much of Newcastle you've seen this season, but is the one that springs to mind for you who you think could really make the difference for Newcastle on Thursday?
I guess, in terms of, at the risk of repeating myself, I think the importance when you play Barca is that pacing behind and then being ruthless and efficient when you do get in behind. So you're looking at Gordon and Alanga if they both play. But I think in terms of Newcastle in general, I think what is most impressive from sort of an outsider point of view is probably that midfield pairing, or the midfield three, if you will, at times with Jovenson as well. But especially Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali, I think they're obviously sort of key to Newcastle. They're obviously top level players, born for these nights against Barcelona, and they're going to be key in terms of, because obviously if Barca are pressing well, how quickly they can sort of find that space and find those balls in behind for the runners. So that's probably what you'd be looking at from a Newcastle point of view.
Yeah, I think many people will be putting their hopes on Sandro Tonali or Bruno Guimaraes having the game of their lives, because the midfield battle seems to always be key. But Tonali's just, he's something else. When we talk about midfielders and how good they are, he's right at the top of the list. Newcastle United fans in the build-up to this game are kind of looking back to 2 years ago when PSG arrived at St James's Park, and it was felt like maybe the stars of PSG then, as well as the fans, had kind of underestimated the power of St James's Park and the boost that gave Newcastle United players on the evening. Is there any chance that Barcelona will do the same and not maybe understand or respect that the power that this arena can actually have and how it can impact on the night?
I don't think so. This is a group of players, maybe last year perhaps, but this is a group of players that sort of come together under Hansi Flick. And the bulk of them were sort of there under Xavi as well, a lot of the youngsters that have come through from the club. And, if you go back to last season, they had some big Champions League away games, Dortmund, Inter Milan, even Benfica to a certain degree. So they've had those big nights, they've experienced those big nights. So I think they'd be expecting, I think there's an admiration for the Premier League full stop from Spain and Spanish football. Sometimes over the top, in my opinion. I think if you go to some, a lot of games sort of week by week, perhaps don't have the atmosphere, a general league game. I'm not talking about Newcastle, just talking about in general, that perhaps sort of Spanish players and fans think they have when they're comparing to La Liga games. But there is an admiration. There's absolutely an understanding of what to expect when they go to Newcastle. Obviously, Hansi Flick has already spoken about that after the game on Sunday night. He said, he's well aware of the work that Eddie Howe's been doing, of the atmosphere that they're going to expect. And I think perhaps the idea that if there was a factor that maybe they could underestimate a bit, I think perhaps you lose a little bit of that with the fact it's the first game and that excitement of being the first Champions League game. And I think there's a little bit of a feeling since the Valencia game that perhaps they did coast a little bit through those first 3 games, and perhaps that was the reason why they weren't, pressing or 100% as they should have been. And it's almost a bit like, the season kind of starts now after this September international break. So I think they'd be firing on all cylinders. And yeah, they're really up for the Champions League. That's their big goal this season. So even ignoring the Newcastle factor, I think whoever they were playing, they'd be keen to make a statement this Thursday in the Champions League, just because of losing in the semi-final last year. It was the only competition they didn't win. They haven't won it since 2015. It's such a massive goal for them, having seen Real Madrid win so many over the last decade. It's absolutely sort of top of their list this season. And then you've also got the other factor, players are more than aware of Newcastle. On the other end, most of the players are obviously young. I don't know if you've seen this week, obviously Robert Lewandowski and the photo of him in a Newcastle shirt when he was a kid, and being a big Shearer fan. So he'll have that factor. He'll know all about St James's Park as well. And he's a good leader. He's good at sort of transmitting those feelings and that history to the younger players.
You mentioned there about them kind of focusing on the Champions League. That's their aim. And obviously they're coming to this game on Thursdays favourites as well. So is the assumption that they handle both the expectation of being favourites on Thursday, but also the one to win the Champions League with like relative ease? Like it's not like a daunting expectation on their shoulders?
I think yes. Look, later maybe they lose on Thursday and maybe they get to the quarterfinals and they humiliate themselves against someone. But the feeling, I've been covering Barca for over a decade now, and the feeling is there was a period after those heavy defeats, going back to Rome, to Liverpool when they threw away the 3-0 lead and lost 4-0, and then culminating with the 8-2 to Bayern Munich, and then a couple of years afterwards they failed to even get out of the group stage. And there was a feeling that, especially in away games in the Champions League, there was a real fear factor. There was a real sort of psychological element to that. I mean, there's a famous, in their own club documentary, there was that famous sort of image of Jordi Alba crying in the dressing room at Anfield and stuff, and the narrative and everything that came with these big Champions League away games was clearly affecting them. What we have seen in the last 18 months, probably slightly starting with Xavi when they went to Paris Saint-Germain and won, but certainly under Hansi Flick this last year, is a fearlessness about this group, and they're not affected by pressure. And I think it's highlighted really by Lamine Yamal, and even though he might not be playing on Thursday, I think when you just see this guy at 18 and the sort of the way, maybe at some point the pressure will hit him and he will feel the pressure, but the way he's coped with it and doesn't sort of, nothing phases him. I've not, beyond him on the pitch in terms of his just sort of demeanor and his calmness off the pitch, is, maybe it's a cliche or not, but it's been remarkable for me to see, because you've seen a lot of youngsters come through at Barcelona. A lot of them are quiet, they're shy, they don't like to make big statements, which you can like or not like, but the means always back them up. And some of the statements they've made, against Madrid and stuff, about they can talk as they want but they can't beat me kind of things, and little stuff like that. There's certainly no fear from Barca going into this game that there was in that 4 or 5 year period that there was after those big heavy defeats. The group's been reset. Most of them weren't really there. Perhaps, De Jong and Araujo, perhaps the two who were sort of on the tail end of those years with that previous team, but certainly not a major part of it. And obviously Ter Stegen, perhaps the other one, but he's injured right now.
It's going to be a big test for Newcastle. But if you were sitting across the table from Eddie Howe and he said, Samuel, give me one weakness that I can exploit from this Barcelona side, what would you be telling them?
I mean, I think a lot of his work will be, not a lot of his work, obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, but if Lamine doesn't play, I think that is huge, just because of the players he attracts. I think if you don't have Lamine, you don't have, and look, Rafinha can still come on like he did without Lamine and score 2 goals and still affect games, but teams can shut Rafinha down more, because what you see with Lamine is he just draws 2 or 3 players, and that in turn is why you then see the space for Firmino on if they're playing as the 10, for Rafinha coming in from the left, for Lewandowski as the striker. So if there is no Lamine, that's a big boost. I think the one way to beat Barcelona, you will get chances. You just have to make sure you have the quality which you have in midfield to play those passes in behind, and you have to make sure that you're clinical when you get them, because you may not get loads of clear-cut chances, but if you take the ones that come your way, you will. But I'm sure Eddie's done a lot more research than me, and much better prepared for this. I mean, when you see the way he handled the League Cup final last year, the way they dealt with Liverpool down to 10 men this season, I'm sure he'll have a good plan to deal with this Barca side.
Fingers crossed. Penultimate question then, just briefly, because I know it's been mentioned, it's always mentioned when these two teams play, is the link between Sir Bobby Robson, and obviously he's a legend here on Tyneside and thought of really highly in Barcelona. There is that kind of emotional background to this clash, isn't there?
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, for people of a certain age, certainly my age, I don't know if I do remember those ones, but I grew up sort of with people remembering, obviously the Esprilla hat-trick and those big Newcastle Barca games in '96. It's certainly present in my mind when you see Barca Newcastle. I certainly think of some of those games. And like you say, there's a Bobby link. He was obviously here. I don't know if he'd have been here for that game or around that game. I can't think now, but obviously he was around 95, 96, 97, was it, when Ronaldo was here and had that famous season. He's obviously well thought of here, well-respected figure in the world of football. And yeah, it's another link that ties the two clubs.
Just finally then, what's the result going to be on Thursday? How is it going to go?
It'll probably be low scoring now, but I do think it will be. I do think we see goals on both teams, just because I don't know if I'm falling into the trap of seeing, like I said, the semi-finals, the Benfica games, etc. Even Barca's games against Atletico Madrid in La Liga and the Copa del Rey, crazy sort of 4 draws, 4-2s. The Clásico was 4-3. So I think it will be high scoring. So I think Newcastle have the quality to punish Barca. I think they'll be aggressive, but I also think Barca could score as well. It's just such a shame. I think for Newcastle fans as well, I think it's a massive shame that Lamine's not playing, because for me, I mean, I'll stop. I don't like to get involved in all the talk about who the best player in the world is, etc. But what I do say about Lamine is, and maybe it's a bias because I get to watch him every week, but I would say is I can't think of a player since Lionel Messi that you want to watch so much. Not necessarily because he's the best in the world right now, but just because things happen. He tries things, he takes risks, and more often than not, it comes off. And obviously, it's huge for the team. So it's a shame that he's not there. I think that will tip the balance a little bit. So maybe a 2-2 draw.
Do you know, a lot of people have come back with that scoreline in the last 12 hours since I've put that out to social media. So I'd definitely take 2-2. I'll take a draw. Nice foundation for Newcastle to go on with in this competition. Thank you to Samuel for providing the insight into Barcelona. Thank you to you guys for watching and listening. Do a thumbs up, hit subscribe, get into the comments, leave us a rating and review on the audio only platform. And for myself, I'll see you guys later in the week.